Calmness, from a human perspective, is often mistaken for the absence of something, as if quiet means nothing is occurring and stillness signals a lack of engagement. It seems empty on the surface, defined by what is not present rather than what is. However, for a dog, calmness is never empty. It is filled with signs, subtle layers of information that are constantly being read, processed, and integrated into how the environment is understood. And within those signals, something deeper is being formed, something that extends beyond behavior into the dog's sense of safety itself. Today, we will think together how calm behaviors, often overlooked because they do not need attention, quietly influence how secure your dog feels in their environment. We will look at how your presence, even in moments where nothing appears to be happening, becomes something your dog continuously reads and responds to. Because what creates a sense of safety for a dog is rarely loud or obvious. It tends to exist in patterns that are consistent, predictable, and easy to miss unless you begin to notice the period between actions rather than the actions themselves. Calmness is not passive. There is a common tendency to interpret calm behavior as passive, as something that occurs when activity fades or stimulation is reduced. The meaning must differentiate based calmness for whom, human or dog. A dog lying still, a quiet room, a moment without visible interaction. All of these can be seen as a kind of pause, a break in engagement. But calmness, in the way dogs experience it, is not defined by what is missing. It is a state that carries meaning, one that communicates stability, predictability, and a kind of emotional clarity that does not need to be expressed through movement. What appears inactive on the outside is often structured on the inside. The dog is not disengaged from the environment, but aligned with it, adjusting to a rhythm that feels stable enough to settle into. And that alignment becomes more important over time than any single action, because it creates a foundation that influences how the dog responds when activity does return. The signals within stillness. Dogs do not rely on obvious actions to understand what is happening around them. They are constantly reading small details, the shift in posture, the timing of movement, the way energy changes from one moment to the next. Even stillness has a structure, and within that structure, dogs find cues that help them decide whether they can relax or need to remain alert. A calm presence does not fade into the background. It becomes a reference point, something steady that the dog can orient around. And when that reference remains consistent, it reduces the need for constant evaluation, allowing the dog to settle into a state that feels secure rather than uncertain. Consistency over intensity. What often shapes a dog's sense of calm is not how strongly calm behavior is expressed in a single moment, but how consistently it appears across time. A brief moment of calm followed by unpredictability does not create stability. It introduces contrast, and with that contrast comes uncertainty. But when calmness becomes part of the environment itself, something that repeats without variation, the dog begins to organize their internal state around that consistency. The need to anticipate sudden changes decreases, and energy that would otherwise remain active begins to settle on its own. Over time, this consistency becomes something the dog relies on, not consciously, but as part of how the environment is understood. Do you project your dog's feelings? At this point, it may be worth considering something that is not always easy to see from within your own routine, because it does not stand out in a clear or dramatic way. When your dog appears unsettled, restless, or slightly on edge, it is natural to look at the behavior itself and try to understand it as something coming from the dog. But there is another layer to consider, one that sits quietly beneath those visible reactions. How often do you think about the role your own behavior plays, not in what you actively do, but in what you consistently project without realizing it? Could the energy your dog carries throughout the day be shaped, at least in part, by patterns that begin long before the behavior becomes visible? And if that is the case, where would you begin to notice it first? This is one of those questions that tends to shift depending on perspective, and it often becomes clearer when you reflect on your own experience, which is why it is worth sharing how you see it. Safety without action. One of the more subtle aspects of calm behavior is that it does not require constant action to have an effect. There is often a belief that dogs need continuous input, direction, or engagement to feel secure, as if safety must be actively maintained through interaction. But in many cases, the opposite is true. Security is often built in moments where nothing is being asked, where the environment remains steady enough that the dog does not need to interpret sudden changes or adjust to unexpected shifts. A quiet presence, a predictable rhythm, a space that does not demand constant reaction. These are the conditions where calmness becomes meaningful. And within those conditions, the dog begins to experience the environment as something stable rather than something that needs to be monitored. When calmness is missing, the absence of calm behavior does not always appear dramatic, and in many cases, it is not immediately recognized as a problem. It often reveals itself through small, persistent patterns, a dog that struggles to settle, that remains slightly alert even in familiar spaces, that reacts quickly to minor changes without a clear reason. These behaviors are often attributed to a lack of training, discipline, or exercise, but they may reflect something more foundational. A lack of stability in the environment, not in obvious ways, but in subtle inconsistencies that prevent the dog from fully settling into a predictable pattern. And without that stability, the dog's energy remains active, not because it needs to be, but because it has not been given a consistent signal that it can safely rest. The quiet transfer of state. Dogs do not simply observe calmness from a distance. They absorb it. The emotional tone of an environment does not remain separate from them, but becomes something they adjust to continuously, often without any clear boundary between what is external and what becomes internal. This is why a calm human presence can influence a dog even without direct interaction. The state itself becomes part of the environment, shaping how the dog feels without needing to be expressed in obvious ways. And when that state is inconsistent, the effect can shift just as easily, creating a subtle tension that the dog carries forward, even if nothing specific appears to have changed. Calmness for dog. Calm behavior is not something that needs to be performed in isolated moments, nor is it something that can be introduced suddenly without context. It is something that develops over time, through consistency, through repetition, and through the quiet alignment between what the dog experiences and what the environment communicates. When calmness becomes part of the everyday structure, safety no longer needs to be created in specific situations. It becomes something that is already present, something the dog can rely on without needing to question it. And in that state, behavior begins to settle not because it is controlled, but because it no longer needs to remain active. If this perspective gave you something new to consider, you can subscribe for more episodes like this, where we explore the quieter dynamics behind how dogs experience the world. Because sometimes, the most important signals are the ones that never ask for attention, yet shape everything that follows.